In this video, we're going to talk about the Internet Control Message Protocol, better known as ICMP. Now, ICMP, just like many of the other protocols that we've been talking about so far, they're all a part of the TCP/IP suite of protocols. And just like IP, which we just talked about, ICMP is also a part of the network layer of the OSI model, layer 3. In fact, it is a companion to the IP protocol, specifically an error reporting companion protocol that goes along with IP, because if you remember in our last video, IP doesn't provide any sort of error recovery or sequencing functionality, so we have ICMP that can help out to an extent. Just like IP, it is also connectionless, and its main role is generating error messages to the source IP when it identifies issues on the network that prevents delivery of a packet. Now, it's typically used by routers, but it's also used by IT administrators. So let's talk about routers. So when we're talking about routers, we need to remember that we're talking about IP, specifically their Internet Protocol and IP addresses. So when we're trying to get some data from one switched network to another switched network, then we have to use routers. Routers are used to connect them together, and the Internet Protocol is used. But however, when we have packets of data traversing multiple different routers, there's always the potential for us to run into issues, and so that's where ICMP comes into play. So ICMP provides the routers a methodology, a means to report back packet delivery issues back to the source IP address within that packet. Now, one thing I do want to mention, and this is important, ICMP is designed to report back packet delivery issues. However, ICMP is not designed to correct them. So we also talked about TCP and UDP. TCP has means to correct issues, UDP doesn't, but when we stack on ICMP with UDP, it does provide us some error reporting. And when we have TCP, TCP has a means to correct them. So I want to make sure that we differentiate the difference between those three. So when it comes to IT administrators, whether you're providing desktop support or network support or system administration, we're always from time to time, we're going to run into some sort of an issue on either an end device system like a PC or a server, or a network device like a switch or a router. And there are a variety of command line utility tools that we can use to troubleshoot what's going on. And in regards to ICMP, there are several command line utilities that leverage the ICMP protocol, and specifically those are ping, path ping, and traceroute. So up to this point, everything that we've talked about pertains to both IP version 4 and IP version 6. However, with IP version 6, there's some additional functionality. So there's ICMP version 6 that goes along with IP version 6, and that additional functionality is neighbor solicitation and advertisement messages, which is very similar to the address resolution protocol. So it's very similar to ARP. And the way that this works is that we can also have systems that are advertising their IP addresses. So we could have a PC or a server or a device on the network that's advertising their address to everybody else on the network. Or we can have somebody on there that's asking somebody to provide it, which is called a solicitation, where they say, hey, if you're out there, can you please let me know what your address is? So that's what the neighbor solicitation and advertisement messages are all about. Now, this can also occur with routers. So there's a router solicitation and advertisement messages as well. And it's the exact same process, but it's for routers. We're actually going to talk about that a bit more on the next slide. So let's go ahead and let's jump over to the next slide, and let's talk about some of the more popular and important ICMP message types. So now we're going to take a look at some of the more important ICMP message types. And the reason that we're only going to look at some of them is because there's well over 40 different types of ICMP messages, and that's well beyond the scope of this course. So in regard to the ICMP, and just like any other networking protocol, you can easily go into a rabbit hole of a lot of information that's quickly going to overwhelm you. And I just want to keep it focused on some of the more basic and straightforward and important to know ones. So let's go ahead and let's get started. And we're going to talk about the echo request, echo reply message type first. So this is typically used with the ping and the path ping commands. And the way that it works is that we can use it to test if a destination is accessible or not and its status. When we actually take a look at the ping tool, you'll see how it works. The way that it works is we send what is called an echo request, and we request that the system that we are pinging, that they send back an echo reply. And based upon the message that we get back, we'll know if they're up and reachable or if they're not up and unreachable. So that's the echo request and echo reply. So the second message type is a destination unreachable, and just like its name implies, well, if the destination is unreachable, then it can send a message back and let you know, and this can be sent by a router, but we can also see this when we use tools like ping as well, when we're doing troubleshooting as an IT administrator. So if for some reason it can't reach the next router, or if it can't reach the end device, whether that be an end user PC or a server, it can send back a destination unreachable, and it'll let us know via that message. The next message type is called a source quench. So this occurs when the host, meaning the destination or router along the path to the host that's the destination, if it's overwhelmed, if it's receiving too much data than it can handle, it can send what is called the source quench back to the source, asking them to reduce the rate of its data transmission. In other words, asking them to slow down. So that is the source quench. The next ICMP message type is the redirect message, and this is sent by a router if it believes that the packet should be sent to a different router than itself. So what it will do is it'll send a message back to the router that sent it to it or the device that sent it to it, and it'll include the IP address of the router in which it thinks the future packet should be sent. And the whole point of this is to optimize routing. So for some reason it's taking an unoptimal route, it's going to help it to optimize the routing. The next ICMP message type is time exceeded. So like it says right here, it's sent by a router if a packet has reached the maximum limit of routers through which it can travel. And what we typically call this is a time to live or a hop count limit. So routing protocols are going to set a time to live, typically called a TTL, or a maximum hop count. And if that's exceeded, it's going to drop that packet. And when that occurs, ICMP is going to send this message back to the source, letting them know that that limitation has been exceeded. And this is to limit the lifespan of a packet on a network. So that's the time exceeded ICMP message type. So the last type of message that we need to talk about is the router advertisement and router solicitation messages, which again, we already covered on the last slide. Remember, these are only applicable to IP version 6, and the whole purpose of them are to allow devices on the network to discover the existence of routers. So what routers can do is they can advertise themselves to those devices via a router advertisement message. In other words, they're simply broadcasting out to the network saying, hey, I'm here just in case you need me. And then also a host, meaning an end device on the network, if they need to find out where a router is or if a router exists, they can actually request that that router respond to them with a router solicitation message. So that's the router advertisement and router solicitation messages that are only applicable to IP version 6. And that's going to conclude this video where we did an introduction into ICMP and the ICMP message types. So if you have any questions, please let me know.